It's been a little while since I made a game review video, but we're finally making one again. I recently completed Ori the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and they're both still phenomenal games. I absolutely love them to bits. They're just fantastical, like, that's literally the only word you can use to... I turned this on silent. That is like the only word you can use to describe those two games. They're easily some of my favourite games. My favourite Metroidvania game for sure is Will of the Wisps. So I guess let's just start with talking about the Blind Forest. The reason I got into these games originally was the composer, Gareth Coker, did the soundtrack to Ark Survival Evolved, one of my favourite survival games, unfortunately. I thought, well, the soundtrack to this is one of my favourites. Let's try this one out, and it absolutely delivered in soundtrack as well. These are on my Spotify playlist, some of my favourite tracks being Embracing the Light, Facing the Dark. No, Restoring the Light, Facing the Dark. Narrow Embracing Light's the other one. Light of Nibble is also a really good one. And from Will of the Wisps, Ori and Shriek and Maru? Is it Maru? Or is it Mar? Either way, The Spider. Those tracks are some of my favourite and most notable ones. But yeah, so I started playing them and I was just hooked from start to finish. Blind Forest was like my first platformer, 2D platformer in forever. Obviously it is Metroidvania at heart, but it just felt primarily platformer with very little focus on combat due to there being limited actual combat moves. You could attack with a auto aim thing and stomp. There was a few other abilities which you can use in combat, but they mainly were focused on traversal. But either way, absolutely got hooked on it, played it from start to finish, then immediately went on to the sequel. Both of the games were out when I started playing. But one thing that also really got me like enjoying the game was just the visuals. I believe what they did was they didn't use a tile map, they used like individual pieces, drag them overlapping, whatnot. I put them on the same layer to make the levels, which is incredible. I love that type of style. It makes it all feel so fresh, unique and natural almost, as opposed to what like a tile set would do, which most games use a tile set. But yeah, it's such a beautiful style. I think the thing that I see it most getting compared to is Ghibli's style. I've only watched one Studio Ghibli film, so I do see how people can draw a resemblance, and I think I'm gonna have to start watching more. Boy in the Heron was alright, but didn't get too into it. And one common complaint I saw with Blind Forest, because I've been on a little replaying games or playing games for the first time, I usually get a little micro obsession with them. So I'll just kind of dedicate my YouTube feed and all that for the next week based around that game. Yeah, I went on a little YouTube spree, watched a bunch of playthroughs again, and watched some reviews, because in recent years I've got more into reviews. A lot of complaints were about the difficulty spikes in the escape things, which I can see. But the one thing I will not tolerate is Ginso Tree Slander. That is my favourite sequence in the entire game. It's so good. And the music is phenomenal throughout. Like, that track just lives in my head constantly. It's brilliant. It's like a perfect level to kind of put all you've been taught to the test. And the bash ability is one of my favourite abilities in platforming. It's so good. Yeah, Ginso Tree Slander will not be tolerated. I can understand the Forlorn Ruins, I believe that's... Yeah, I think it's the Forlorn Ruins in the first game here. Forlorn Ruins, the wind type thing, I can understand. It's not very intuitive. I somehow survived the spikes on my first time accidentally. I kind of perfectly aligned through the falling spikes in one sequence instead of going to the left, which you're supposed to do, but it's not very clear. Even just adding maybe a light or like a thing to use bash to the side and then go through would be helpful, because then you have that split second to kind of react, and that would make it better. I can understand that. Is there not one between the final bit where you're running from Kuro? I believe that might just be it. So yeah, it goes Ginso Tree, Forlorn Ruins, Mount Haru's little escape thing with Kuro, which is intuitive for the most part. There's a few sequences which I died way too much because I was like, where do I need to go next? The timer was a bit harsh on how long it took for Kuro, but I did learn it a bit more. The track's obviously not stopping then starting again. It shows that the developers intended you to die. I understand the criticism, but I also understand the vision. It did need a little few tweaks here and there to make them much better, but I enjoyed them. I enjoyed the game as a whole. And one thing about these games is when you beat them, it just feels like a masterpiece. You think about it logically. They're not masterpieces. They have flaws. There are things that they do well, but there are things that could be done better. But it's just one of those games where you leave it feeling it's a masterpiece. You can get that out of pretty much any game. There is no such thing as a masterpiece, but some games just capture something in you that makes you feel like you've just played a masterpiece. And this is one of those games, and I highly recommend them. And then moving on to Will of the Wisps. This is one of those sequels which absolutely delivers, and I love it. Now, I have seen some stupid reviews. There was like one stupid one which complained about the fucking intro of how they get to the new area. And then he made like this alternative which just felt even more stupid. And I think one thing people need to learn is suspension of disbelief is a tool which you can use to create such amazing stories if you stop limiting your mind and allow yourself to be creative. Obviously there's such thing as far-fetched, but in a world like this, very difficult to reach far-fetched. And I think the game intro did it fine. It was like this complaint about, oh, they're stupid enough to go over water with a feather tied on with string. They're kids. Kids do stupid shit. I did stupid shit. In fact, I went over a lake trying to climb on a string. Well, not a string, like a rope. And then I got stuck kind of in the same. I got tired, so I was just kind of trapped there until someone came over to help me. Kids do stupid shit. Them going over a lake in their first flight is honestly something a kid would do if they were given that much freedom. But that's my rant over. My god, it is such a good sequel. I really love the embracing of the Metroidvania, taking elements from so many popular Metroidvanias. The Hollow Knight inspiration's clear, and that isn't by no means a bad thing. Inspiration is such a good thing. People need to use it more, but the community in the gaming culture is so toxic. Like, it's horrendously toxic. So borrowing inspiration as such, or basing things off that, and then putting your own, or just, you don't even need to put your own twist on some things. Some things are just simple as mechanics. It's just a mechanic that things can use. And Palworld is a good example of a game that took inspiration from a popular franchise and did its own little twists here and there. Borrow mechanics, it's fine. As long as you don't copy the game or ruin the mechanic in some way that makes it not fun, which is your own fault by that point, it's fine. I see no problem with copying mechanics. It invites creativity. You can use something as a base to build on it and create your own vision. It's brilliant. But this is just turning into a big rant video. I'm gonna have to put that tag somewhere. But anyway, it's just such an incredible game. With the combat in this game is just so fun. You combine so much. Well, actually, you don't combine, because a lot of the abilities are kind of made with the actual platforming in mind, and then there's like 3 buttons for combat, which you can still use some of these abilities in traversal. So if you can just cook up a little formula here and there, you can excel in both platforming and combat throughout the game. It's really good. Obviously, it keeps things like the bash, the dash. They get rid of climb. Instead, it's the kind of jumping up walls, but there is also an ability in the new shards they introduced, which is kind of like a play on the, is it badges or pins in Hollow Knight? Little things you can collect and equip. They do their own thing. You don't need to be a bench to equip these, you can equip them freely. But it's such a nice feature again. It takes a great mechanic from another game and makes an equally great mechanic in this game. I really enjoyed the use of the badges, and it made gameplay interesting, swapping them in and out. But yeah, just swapping pins out here and there to just try and perfect a strategy against a boss or a platforming section, or just a combination of the two. It was just great. I really enjoy all the Metroidvania aspects. The soundtrack is just as good, the visuals just as good. There are even improvements throughout, and then they do listen to the community's feedback on the escape segments, not by removing them, they still want to keep their vision, but kind of toning them down a bit. And I think one thing they really do that's great is integrating them with bosses. So either just before a boss fight or amidst a boss fight even, you have to do like this little parkour segment just to get from one area to another to continue the fight in a different way or such. Sometimes they literally blend the parkour with the boss fight. So with the spider boss fight, I'm not going to even bother trying to do the name anymore. I think it's Mora, but anyway, you have to parkour around the arena to dodge certain attacks, like a laser beam type thing of venom that she shoots around. So there's these lanterns, there's walls, you can just jump around. You can use little minions she summons to bash around and whatnot. In the boss fight at the very end of the game, it integrates parkour with the actual fight. So you have to parkour around the arena to stay alive, whilst also fighting and dodging the boss's attacks. It's this really intense sequence, which is just so much fun, and I really enjoyed it. And then obviously the narrative of this game, the first game's narrative was simple. That was the beauty of it. It was just a simple narrative, good, bad, light, dark, and then finding balance, being able to coexist. It's just a simple story about coexistence, and I think it's really beautiful. In this game, there's a story of responsibility. There is a story of light and dark again. There is the attempt at coexistence, but also a message of you can't always find that balance. Sometimes people will not strive for that balance. Some people are content with imbalance. It's a lot deeper than the first game, and I think it is just as equally beautiful. I think the story of responsibility in this game was the one which stood out to me. I'm not going to get into too many spoilers. I've said like boss fights and parkour segments, but overall I just wanted to say these are phenomenal games. If you haven't played them, I cannot recommend it enough. There's a Steam bundle that goes on sale quite frequently. Just pick that up when you have the time. Sit down for, let's see, how long did Blind Forest take me? Blind Forest took me 8 hours, and that wasn't completionist. I just did kind of a few things. There was also a bit of time sat in menus. And then Will of the Wisps took me just under 16 hours. Again, could not tell you how much of that was menu, but I did a completionist run of one save. I haven't got all the achievements yet. I've got 25% left. Most of them are speedrun achievements, no dying, no spending light, no equipping shards, that sort of thing. There's also a few boss fight based achievements. Like, I surprised myself, I got a speedrun achievement for beating a boss in under 2 minutes, so that was a really proud achievement of mine. I do not speedrun games at all, so getting a kind of speedrunny achievement, phenomenal. But yeah, cannot recommend them enough. If you've not played them or checked them out, highly recommend it. You won't regret it. These are just two games which aren't masterpieces, both have their flaws, but you will still feel like you've just played a masterpiece. So yeah, that's about it. See you around.